Hey guys, we are going to get into the next section, which is 7.5, I believe. Let me go ahead and double check that. Yep, it is 7.5 on factoring. Okay, so when we are talking about factoring, before we actually get into how we're going to factor, we're going to do these 4 puzzles real quick, and we are going to look at what multiplies to give us this top number and what adds to give us this bottom number. Okay, so let's look at our factors of 20. So I know that I've got 20 and 1, I've got 10 and 2, and I've got 5 and 4. These are all of our factors of 20. Okay, so I know 20 times 1 gives me 20, but 20 plus 1 is not 9. Okay, 10 times 2 is 20, but 10 plus 2 is not 9. 5 times 4 is 20, and 5 times 4 or 5 plus 4 gives us 9. So I know that these two are going to be 5 and 4. All right, so do you see what we're doing here? We're multiplying to the top and adding to the bottom. So over here, I'm going to look at just the factors of 48. I'm not going to talk negative or positive yet, just looking at the factors of 48 first. Okay, so, and you'll see that I have a method of putting all of my big numbers on one side and all of my small numbers on the other side, and you'll see why in just a minute. Okay, so I know that I have 48 times 1 is 48. 24 times 2 gives me 48. 12 times 4. 6 times 8. Oh, I switched to the 6 and the 8. I want the big numbers on the other side. So we've got 8 and 6, all right? And then we've got 16 and 3. All right, so if I look, 48 times 1, 24 times 2, 12 times 4, 8 times 6, and 16 times 3. All of these give me 48. But notice right here that it is a negative 48. In order to multiply two numbers together to get a negative, we have to multiply a negative and a positive. But notice we want to add to be a positive number. So that means my bigger number is going to be positive. So all of these smaller numbers over here, I'm going to make negative. 48 times negative 1 gives me a negative 48, but when I add those together, I don't get a positive 2. So I go through and I look at my pairs, and I can see right here, this 8 and negative 6, that gives me that positive 2. Multiply them together, you get negative 48. Add them together, you get that positive 2. All right. Our next one, we are multiplying to 30 and adding to a negative 13. So I'm going to look at my factors of 30. I've got 30 and 1, 15 and 2, 10 and 3, and then 6 and 5. So in this one, I'm multiplying to a positive, but I'm adding to a negative. All right, so there's two ways of multiplying to a positive. I can either do a positive times a positive, which gives us a positive, or a negative times a negative, which gives me a positive. Now, if I'm adding to a negative number, that means both of my numbers are going to be negative. So if I look, my negative 10 plus a negative 3 is going to give me my negative 13. And then our last one over here, multiplying to a negative 60 and adding to a negative 11. So let's look at our factors of 60. We have 60 and 1, 30 and 2, 15 and 4. Let's see, 10 and 6, 20 and 3. Think that might, nope, and then 12 and 5. There we go. All right, so when I'm looking, I want to multiply to a negative. So again, it's got to be a positive times a negative to get a negative. Doesn't matter which order, it's a positive times a negative to get a negative. So we need to figure out, do we have more positives or more negatives here? Well, when I'm adding them together, I get a negative number. So that means my bigger numbers are going to be negative. So which of those pairs, when we add them together, do we get a negative 11? And that's going to be our negative 15 and 4. All right, so when we are looking at these, and this is what's going to be really important, you might want to, for at least the first while, keep these 4 x's on hand, okay, to help you kind of work through. If we are multiplying to a positive and adding to a positive, well, that's easy. Both of these are going to be positive. If we're multiplying to a positive but adding to a negative, both of these will be negative. If we're multiplying to not multiplying to a positive, if we're multiplying to a negative, that's when we have one of each sign. And then if we're adding to a positive, that means our positive is going to be bigger. Okay, that means we have more positives than we do negatives, because when we add them together, we're in the positive. If we multiply to a negative and add to a negative, that means our negative is going to be the bigger because we have more of our negatives. Okay, so that's going to make more sense as we start to get into this, but you definitely want to make sure that you have this on hand over the next several sections, because we're going to be working with this. This is called the X method, okay? So getting into factoring, this is why we were using that, okay? This is why I had you start with those. What we have here is we are going to multiply to this last number, and we are going to add to this middle number. This is our B value, and this is our C value. So in our X, we multiply to our C value, and we add to our B value. Okay, so multiplying to 6, adding to a 5. If we look here, okay, let's look at our factors of 6, and you might not have to actually put them out every time, but I've got 6 times 1 and 3 times 2. Okay, I'm multiplying to a positive, adding to a positive, so they both will be positive. So my 3 and 2 multiply to 6 and add to that 5. When I do this, I'll have 2 sets of parentheses here. So I have one that says x plus 3 and one that says x plus 2. And then that's it. You factored it. That is your final answer. Okay, this right here is your factored form. Now, of course, just like normal, we can check it. Okay, if we were to multiply this back out, which is what we were doing in the first several sections, we're going to FOIL it out. So x times x gives us x squared. X times 2 gives us 2x. 3 times x is 3x. And then 3 times 2 gives us 6. When we combine our like terms, we get x squared plus 5x plus 6. And if you look, that is exactly where we started. All right. So let's try another one. Okay, we're going to be doing just a lot of practicing with this today, just to kind of get the hang of it. All right, so we want to draw our x. We are multiplying to our C value of 36, and we are adding to our B value of 13. Okay, you always multiply to that constant and add to the one with the x value. All right, so we're multiplying to 36 and adding to 15. Again, these are both positive. That means that both of these side pieces are going to be positive. Okay, so we want to look what multiplies to 36, adds to 13. All right, so 36 and 1, 18 and 2, 12 and 3, 6 and 6, 9 and 4, and there it is. All right, a positive 9 and a positive 4 are going to add to give you that 13. So our answer would be x plus 4 and x plus 9. Or you could write it x plus 9 times x plus 4. It does not matter because multiplication has the commutative property. They can switch places. They can move around. All right, these two are the same thing. And of course, you can always multiply it back out to check your answer. All right. In our next one, we are multiplying to that C value of 28, and we are adding to that B value of 11. So if you still need to write out those factors, please do that. If you don't need to, that's perfectly fine. Okay, so for 28, we've got 28 and 1, and we have 7 and 4. Okay, both of these are positive, so that means these are going to stay positive, so we've got 7 and 4. So our factored form, x plus 7 times x plus 4, and you're done. All right, now we are getting into where we've got a negative and a positive. All right, so I'm multiplying to my 18, and I'm adding to a negative 11. So I'm again going to write out my 18. I've got 18 and 1, 9 and 2, 6 and 3. If I'm multiplying to a positive and adding to a negative, remember that means both numbers are going to be negative. So if we're looking at what adds to that negative 11, that's going to be our negative 9 and negative 2. So when we factor, when we write out our factors, we have the quantity of x minus 9 times the quantity of x minus 2. Okay, that is your final answer. All right, let's try the next one. All right, here we are multiplying to 15. Oh, didn't mean to write that up there. Multiply to 15, and then adding to a negative 8. Okay, again, multiplying to a positive, adding to a negative. That means both factors will be negative. Both of these will be negative. So I'm trying to think of two factors of 15 that would add to 8, and that's 5 and 3. So I'm going to have a negative 5 and a negative 3. So I'd have the quantity of x minus 5 times the quantity of x minus 3, and then it is factored. Again, you can always check your answer. Even if you're not checking every single one, at least check every so often. Okay, so we have our first, x times x, we get x squared. Outer, we get a negative 3x. Inner, we get a negative 5x. And then last, we get plus 15. Combine your like terms, and you do, in fact, get exactly what we started with. All right, and then the last one for this video, I know I'm going to have to make it into at least 2 different videos. So for the last one for this video, okay, let's multiply to 42, and then add to a negative 13. Again, we are multiplying to a positive, which means either positive times positive or negative times negative. Since we are adding to a negative 13, adding to a negative, that tells us that both of these are negative. All right, so if we go through our factors, okay, you can list out your factors, but we know it's going to be negative 6 and negative 7. So our factored form would be the quantity of x minus 6 times the quantity of x minus 7. And this, again, that is your factored answer. That is your final answer. It doesn't simplify any further than that. All right, so we're going to stop